7 guys from South Korea. Debuted on a shoestring budget at a small label that was nearly broke in an industry that wasn't ready for them. And yet their name is now permanently printed in the Guinness World Records more than 25 times over. Not because of luck, not because of a momentary hype cycle, because of numbers that nobody on earth can argue with. What makes this story genuinely worth paying attention to isn't just the records themselves. It's how a group singing mostly in a language the majority of the world doesn't speak managed to dominate American charts, shatter milestones that had stood for decades under names like the Beatles, Luis Fonsi, and Psy, and leave a mark that the global music industry still hasn't fully figured out how to explain. The question is simple: which records do they still hold today, and why are those records far bigger than most people actually realize? We start at number 6. Number 6, best-selling album in South Korean history, Map of the Soul, 7. Let's establish some context first, because this record only hits right when you understand what the South Korean music market actually looks like. Korea is not a small music market. It consistently ranks among the top 10 largest recorded music markets in the world, and its domestic album sales culture is one of the most active on the planet. Fans physically buy albums in bulk, in multiple versions, across multiple formats. Competition there is brutal. Hundreds of acts release albums every year fighting for chart position, and the Gaon album chart, South Korea's official national chart, has been tracking sales with rigorous precision since 2010. So, when something breaks the all-time sales record on that chart, it means something real. Map of the Soul. 7 was released on the 21st of February 2020. The album sold over 2.65 million copies in its first 6 hours alone. Read that again, not in its first week, not in its first month, in its first 6 hours. By the end of the first week, that number had climbed to a record-breaking 3.37 million copies, achieving the highest first-week sales in Hanteo chart history and surpassing BTS's own previous record set by Map of the Soul, Persona. They broke their own record with their next album. In under 9 days of its release, the album sold more than 4.1 million copies, marking the highest sales achieved by an album in a single month and over a single year in the Gaon album chart's history, making it the best-selling album in the history of South Korea, and the first Korean album to sell more than 4 million copies since the Gaon chart's inception. Guinness World Records officially certified this title, and it has held ever since. Wikipedia. But the reach of this album didn't stop at the Korean border. Map of the Soul. 7 topped the charts in the world's 5 largest music markets: the United States, Japan, the United Kingdom, Germany, and France. That made BTS the first Asian group in history to reach number 1 across all 5 of those markets simultaneously. The last group to earn 4 number 1 albums on the Billboard 200 as fast as BTS did it with this run was the Beatles in 1968. The YouTube premiere of the lead single On was the biggest in the platform's history at the time, attracting over 1.5 million concurrent viewers. Following the premiere, the official music video for On reached 10 million views in just 65 minutes, making it the fastest video ever to do so at that point. What makes the Map of the Soul 7 record particularly durable is that it wasn't just a sales spike driven by a single viral moment. It was the culmination of a methodical 7-year build from a group that debuted in 2013 with almost zero industry support, grew their fanbase one honest conversation at a time through social media, and created a listener loyalty so deep that when they dropped an album, millions of people around the world treated buying it as a personal commitment, not a casual purchase. The Guinness title for best-selling album in South Korean history still belongs to this record. As of January 2023, the album had sold over 5 million copies in South Korea alone. In a streaming era where physical album sales globally have been in long-term decline, a group sold 5 million physical copies of a single album in one country. That's not a music industry anomaly. That's a redefinition of what fan engagement can actually look like at scale, and it's a record that years later, nobody has come close to touching. Number 5. Most weeks on the Billboard Hot 100 by a K-pop track, Dynamite. To understand why this record matters, you need to understand what the Billboard Hot 100 actually is, and why cracking it as a non-English language act has historically been close to impossible. The Hot 100 is the United States' definitive singles chart, blending streaming data, radio airplay, and digital sales into one unified ranking. It has existed since 1958. In over 6 decades of operation, the chart has been dominated almost exclusively by English-language music, with radio airplay playing a massive gatekeeping role. Non-English acts have occasionally broken through Psy's Gangnam Style, peaked at number 2 in 2012, and became a cultural phenomenon, but sustained presence on that chart, week after week, was something no Korean act had ever achieved. Dynamite debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on the chart, dated the 5th of September 2020, making BTS the first all-South Korean act in Hot 100 history to debut at number 1, and the first Asian act to chart a number 1 song in the United States since Kyu Sakamoto with Sukiyaki in 1963. That gap between Asian number 1s on the Hot 100 was 57 years. Let that land for a moment. The song sold 300,000 units in its first week, including downloads and physical vinyl and cassette versions, earned 33.9 million total US on-demand streams, and drew 11.6 million radio airplay audience impressions. Those are not niche numbers. Those are mainstream American pop numbers for a song released by a Korean group on a Friday morning that most US radio programmers had never seriously considered putting into rotation. But the debut was only the beginning of what made Dynamite historically significant on this chart. The real record isn't about where it started, it's about how long it stayed. Dynamite spent its 32nd week on the Billboard Hot 100 on the chart, dated the 10th of April 2021, becoming the longest charting song by a Korean artist on the chart, surpassing the record previously shared with Psy's Gangnam Style, 32 consecutive weeks inside the Hot 100. That means for 8 straight months, an all-English single by a Korean group held its ground on America's most competitive singles chart, week after week, against the full weight of the American music industry's output. Guinness World Records officially certified this as the most weeks on the US Hot 100 by a K-pop track. The record was earned not by radio dominance. BTS never cracked the top 10 on the radio songs chart until well into Dynamite's run, but almost entirely by the purchasing and streaming discipline of their fanbase combined, with genuine crossover appeal that slowly pulled in casual listeners, who had never paid attention to K-pop before. In the same run, Dynamite also tied Despacito for the most weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Digital Song Sales chart, topping it for 18 weeks. Luis Fonsi's Despacito had held that record since 2017 and was itself considered an almost unreachable benchmark for non-English language music in the American market. BTS matched it exactly, with a song written entirely in English, their first specifically designed to reach audiences who had never engaged with Korean music in their lives. Dynamite was also the first K-pop song to surpass 1 billion streams on Spotify, crossing that milestone on the 20th of July 2021, and the first to surpass 2 billion streams, reaching that mark on the 10th of August 2024. Nearly 4 years after its release, the song was still accumulating streams at a pace that pushed it past a threshold only a handful of songs in history have ever reached. The reason this record is worth understanding is what it represents structurally. Dynamite didn't just chart well, it proved that a non-Western act could build the kind of sustained American commercial presence that the industry had always assumed required either native English fluency, a US-based label infrastructure, or heavy radio machine support. BTS had none of those advantages when they started. They built the audience first, then let the numbers do the talking, and the Billboard Hot 100 had no choice but to reflect exactly what was happening. Number 4. Most followers for a music group on TikTok, BTS. Before getting into the numbers, it is worth establishing what TikTok dominance actually means in competitive terms, because this is not a platform where legacy acts with decades of catalog automatically win. TikTok's algorithm is fundamentally democratic in a way that older platforms are not. A song released in 1995 can go viral tomorrow if the right sound clip catches. A brand new artist with zero label backing can outperform a major label superstar in a single week. Follower counts on TikTok are therefore a genuinely contested metric because every major act in the world, from Taylor Swift to Drake to Ariana Grande, is actively competing for that space with full label support, dedicated social media teams, and coordinated content strategies. Holding the top spot for a music group on that platform means beating all of them simultaneously on their own turf. BTS joined TikTok on the 25th of September 2019 and immediately set a record by becoming the fastest account on the platform to gain 1 million followers, reaching that milestone in just 3 hours and 31 minutes. They hadn't posted a single piece of content yet. The account existed for a few hours and already had 1 million followers purely from fans who had been waiting for the account to appear and followed it the moment it went live. That kind of organized, pre-mobilized fanbase behavior is not something that can be manufactured by a marketing team. It is the result of years of sustained, genuine connection between the group and its audience. As of the 14th of April 2022, BTS held the Guinness World Record for the most followed band on TikTok, with 49 million followers, placing them 16th on the platform overall, excluding TikTok's own account. To put that in perspective, that ranking placed them ahead of virtually every other music act on Earth on a platform that was, at that point, the fastest-growing social media application in history with over 1 billion monthly active users. 49 million followers on TikTok is not a niche achievement. It is mass-scale cultural penetration in a format built specifically for short attention spans and rapid content turnover, two conditions that should theoretically disadvantage a group whose music is mostly in Korean and whose content often requires cultural context to fully appreciate. What makes this record particularly interesting is the mechanism behind it. BTS did not win TikTok by flooding the platform with algorithmically optimized short clips, though their label certainly understood the platform. They won it in large part because their fanbase, ARMY, treated the platform as an active organizing space. Fans created content using BTS audio, choreography challenges spread organically, and the group's existing global footprint on other platforms translated directly into TikTok followership at a scale that competitors simply could not match through conventional content strategies alone. The broader context here matters too. TikTok by 2022 had become arguably the single most important platform for music discovery globally. Songs that went viral on TikTok saw streaming numbers spike overnight. Record labels restructured their marketing strategies entirely around TikTok virality. Holding the #1 music group position on that platform during the peak of its cultural influence meant BTS was sitting at the center of the most powerful music discovery engine on Earth, and doing so organically, without the kind of artificial virality campaigns that many labels were quietly paying for behind the scenes. BTS also holds the record for most followers for a music group on Twitter, and in February 2022, officially broke their own record for most followers for a music group on Instagram, reaching 60,151,959 followers on that platform. Across every major social platform simultaneously, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, BTS held the #1 position for a music group at the same time. That kind of synchronized cross-platform dominance has no real precedent in the history of popular music, and it did not happen by accident or by algorithm. It happened because the group spent years treating their online presence as a genuine extension of who they were, not as a promotional channel. Billboard. The TikTok record stands as one of the cleaner illustrations of what BTS actually built, not just a fan base, but a globally distributed, self-organizing community that moved together across platforms with a consistency and speed that the music industry is still trying to reverse engineer. 3. Most viewed YouTube music video in 24 hours by a K-pop group, Butter. To understand the weight of this record, you need to understand what the 2-4-hour YouTube view count has become in the modern music industry. It is not just a vanity metric. It is the single most watched, most reported, most commercially significant benchmark in music video culture. Today, the number that lands on Billboard headlines, gets cited in label boardrooms, and determines the trajectory of an entire album campaign in its first day. Every major act in the world coordinates global fan streaming parties, optimizes upload times across time zones, and deploys every available promotional tool, specifically to maximize that first 4-hour window. It is, in the most literal sense, the most competitive 24 hours in the music business. BTS had already held this record once before. When Dynamite was released in August 2020, its music video amassed 101,100,000 views within the first 24 hours, securing the Guinness World Record for most viewed YouTube music video in 24 hours at the time. 101 million views in a single day for a debut music video drop, with no pre-existing video content on the platform to ride on, purely driven by fan anticipation and coordinated global streaming. That alone was a record that seemed nearly untouchable. Then BTS broke their own record with Butter. The music video for Butter earned 108,200,000 views within the first 24 hours of its release, surpassing Dynamite and becoming the most viewed YouTube music video in 24 hours at the time of its release. In one move, they erased their own benchmark and replaced it with a higher one. The margin was not small, roughly 7 million additional views on top of an already historically dominant number, achieved in the same 4-hour window, against a global music landscape that had spent the intervening months studying exactly how BTS fans operated and trying to build comparable mobilization systems for other acts. What made Butter's performance particularly significant was the timing. By May 2021, the 4-hour YouTube record had become a fiercely contested battleground. K-pop labels had invested heavily in fan coordination infrastructure. Major Western acts were deploying sophisticated streaming campaign strategies. The bar had risen sharply from where it stood even 2 years earlier. And yet BTS not only cleared that higher bar, they set a new ceiling for what the record could look like for a K-pop group specifically. Butter single-handedly secured 5 Guinness World Records upon its release, making it one of the most record-breaking single drops in music history. Beyond the 4-hour YouTube record, Butter also broke the record for most viewers for the premiere of a music video on YouTube, a record that had previously been held by BTS's own Dynamite. Once again, they replaced themselves at the top of their own record category. Additionally, BTS Army streamed Butter on Spotify 20.9 million times within its first 24 hours, setting the record for most streamed track on Spotify in the first 24 hours at that point. The Spotify number deserves a separate moment of attention. 20.9 million streams in 24 hours means that on average, Butter was being streamed approximately 242 times every single second for an entire day straight, across every time zone on Earth, by listeners coordinating in real time through fan networks spanning dozens of countries. That level of synchronized global behavior around a single piece of content, sustained for 24 continuous hours, represents something that has no real equivalent in pre-streaming music history. The record for most viewed YouTube music video in 24 hours by a K-pop group remains with Butter to this day. It is a record built on top of a record by the same group in consecutive years, which in itself says something specific about the consistency and scalability of what BTS built. Most acts get one peak moment. BTS used their first peak moment as the baseline for their next one. Number 2. Most streamed group on Spotify of all time, BTS. Spotify is the largest audio streaming platform on Earth. As of 2024, it operates in over 180 countries, carries more than 100 million tracks in its catalog, and serves roughly 600 million monthly active users. When Spotify data speaks, it speaks for the broadest, most geographically diverse listening audience that has ever existed in the history of recorded music, not just one country, not just one demographic, not just one format. Every stream on that platform is a real person, in a real location, making a real-time decision to press play on a specific song. The cumulative stream count for any artist on Spotify is therefore the closest thing the modern music industry has to an objective, globally verified measure of sustained listener engagement over time. The most streamed group on Spotify of all time is not a Western act. It is not a legacy rock band with 50 years of catalog. It is not a Latin crossover phenomenon riding a single viral decade. According to Guinness World Records, BTS is the most streamed group on Spotify of all time, a title previously held by Coldplay, who had accumulated 16.1 billion streams before BTS surpassed them. The group that dethroned Coldplay, one of the best-selling acts of the 21st century, with a catalog spanning nearly 3 decades, did so in roughly 10 years of existence, singing predominantly in Korean, without the structural advantages of native English-language radio airplay that had fueled every previous record holder in that category. As of the 24th of February 2024, BTS had amassed over 37.3 billion streams as lead artists on Spotify, with an additional 732 million as featured acts, bringing their total to over 38 billion streams on the platform. To give that number the scale, it deserves 38 billion streams. If each stream averaged approximately 3 minutes, represents roughly 217 billion minutes of listening time. That is over 400,000 years of continuous playback, generated by a group that did not release their first Spotify-available music until years into their career, in a market where Korean-language music had virtually zero Western streaming infrastructure behind it when they started. Their most popular tracks on the platform include Dynamite with 1.81 billion streams, Butter with 1.22 billion streams, and My Universe, their 2021 collaboration with Coldplay, with 1.2 billion streams. The fact that a collaboration with Coldplay, the group BTS dethroned from the most streamed group position, sits in their top 3 most streamed tracks, adds a layer of irony that the data did not plan but delivered anyway. 2 acts at the very top of the all-time streaming hierarchy, collaborating on a track that itself clears 1 billion streams. That is what the ceiling of modern music consumption looks like. What makes this record genuinely difficult to contextualize is the language barrier that should, by every conventional music industry logic, have prevented it from happening at all. Spotify's recommendation algorithm favors familiarity songs in languages listeners already understand, tend to perform better in passive listening contexts, like algorithmic playlists and radio features. Korean is not among the top languages of Spotify's largest user bases in North America and Europe. And yet, BTS accumulated 38 billion streams anyway, meaning hundreds of millions of people made the active, repeated choice to stream music in a language most of them do not speak, across years of listening, across thousands of individual sessions. The group has 30.35 million monthly listeners and 71.36 million followers on Spotify as of early 2024, during a period when all 7 members were completing their mandatory South Korean military service and releasing no new group music. Their streaming numbers were holding at that scale with no active promotion, no new releases, no touring, and no coordinated fan streaming campaigns tied to a comeback cycle. That is what catalog strength looks like when it is real, not manufactured urgency, but genuine, sustained demand that persists even in the absence of the act itself. The most streamed group on Spotify of all time, built song by song, album by album, from a country whose music the Western streaming industry had written off as a niche product for a niche audience. The numbers disagreed. Number 1. Most Guinness World Records broken in a single year by a music group, BTS. Every record on this list so far has been a specific achievement in a specific category. 1 chart, 1 platform, 1 metric. This final entry is different. This one is about the totality. This one is about what happens when you zoom out from the individual milestones and look at what BTS accomplished across every category simultaneously within a single calendar year. Because the answer to that question produced a record that stands entirely in its own category and earned them something that almost no act in music history has received. To understand the full weight of this, you need to understand how Guinness World Records actually works as an institution. The Guinness World Records organization does not hand out titles casually. Every record claim requires documented evidence, verified data from primary sources, and official adjudication. A group does not accumulate 13 verified Guinness World Records in a single year by accident, by hype, or by having an enthusiastic fan base alone. They accumulate them by producing verifiable, measurable achievements across multiple independent categories that each clear the highest documented benchmark ever recorded for that category, 13 times, in 12 months. In 2021 alone, BTS broke a total of 13 Guinness World Records, bringing their cumulative total at the time to 25 records, spanning music, social media, entertainment, and cultural categories. 13 records in a single year. That figure, 13 verified Guinness World Records broken by a music group within one calendar year, is itself a record. No music group in Guinness World Records history had ever broken that many titles in a single year before BTS did it in 2021. The feat earned BTS a place in the Guinness World Records 2022 Hall of Fame, an honor reserved for record breakers whose achievements are considered historically significant enough to warrant permanent institutional recognition, not just a certificate, but an actual dedicated entry in the annual publication that has been documenting human achievement since 1955. Their entry appeared on pages 212 and 213 of the 2022 edition, making them one of the very few music acts in the book's history to receive a Hall of Fame designation rather than a standard record listing. What those 13 records in 2021 actually covered tells the full story of what BTS had become by that point. They held the title of most streamed group on Spotify, most followed music group on Instagram, and most Twitter engagements for a music group, a record they had broken 4 separate times by that point. Their 7th full-length Korean album, Map of Seoul, 7, held the title of best-selling album in South Korea with 4,440,818 copies sold. Their single Butter, released in May of that year, secured 5 records on its own, including most viewers for the premiere of a music video on YouTube and most streamed track on Spotify in the first 24 hours. And Dynamite, released the previous year but still actively charting, achieved the title for most weeks on the US Hot 100 by a Kpop track during its 32nd week on the chart. 13 records across that many independent categories chart performance, physical sales, streaming volume, social media reach, video metrics simultaneously in a single year is not the product of one breakout moment or one viral song. It is the product of an ecosystem. A group that had spent 8 years building genuine connections with a global audience, developing a multi-format presence across every major music consumption platform, and releasing music consistently enough that their catalog had depth as well as peaks. When all of those elements converged in 2021, the result was a record-breaking year so comprehensive that Guinness had to create a new way to acknowledge it. Counting records achieved by member V with his individual Instagram account, the total number of Guinness World Records titles broken by BTS and its members stands at 25. 25 officially verified world records. From a 7-member group that debuted in June, 2013 inches a practice room in Seoul at a label so small it nearly folded in its early years, in a genre the Western music industry had spent decades dismissing as too regional, too foreign, too niche to ever travel. The records say otherwise. Every single one of them.